Well, the time has come to finally defund the ABC. The comments of their chairman, Kim Williams, pompous, arrogant, incompetent comments by their chairman should be the final straw that should see the public call for the defunding of this morally broken ABC. Firstly, just listen to these comments, which sums up the arrogance, the pomposity, and the incompetence of the ABC. This is their chairman, Kim Williams, having a crack at Joe Rogan.
Hello, Kim. Thank you for your
Hi,
address
Jane.
today and welcome back to the club. I have a question about Joe Rogan. So I'm just wondering if you had any observations about what's behind the Joe Rogan effect, how you believe he's managed to so successfully capture this huge market. And then for us here in Australia, you know, how would or should the ABC be going about capturing that kind of audience?
Look, I'm not sure that I'm the right person to respond to that question. I am not a consumer or enthusiast about Mr. Rogan and his work.
Shocking.
I am not one of the 3 billion, and I'm unlikely to be 3 billion and one anytime soon. I think people like Mr. Rogan prey on people's vulnerabilities. They prey on fear, they prey on anxiety, they prey on all of the elements that contribute to uncertainty in society, and they entrepreneur fantasy outcomes and conspiracy outcomes as being a normal part of social narrative. I personally find it deeply repulsive, and to think that someone has such remarkable power in the United States is something that I look at in disbelief. I'm also absolutely in dismay that this can be a source of public entertainment when it's really treating the public as plunder for purposes that are really quite malevolent.
Now, the bizarre thing to show how out of touch the ABC are, in that commentary, their chairman admits he doesn't even listen or watch Joe Rogan. So just think about that. Here he is making these attacks, these personal defamatory attacks on Joe Rogan, but yet he's never even bothered to listen to what he says. If you are a chairman of a company, a $1 billion organisation, remember the ABC gets a $1.1 billion from the taxpayer. It is your job, what you are being paid to do, to watch the competition. And in any industry, if you've got a new upstart competitor that is stealing your market share, that is taking away your market share, as is happening to the ABC, as their viewing numbers continue to decrease, you would be watching that competition. You'd be watching them carefully. You'd be analysing every single thing they did to see if you could improve the way you do things. Is there something that you could do better? Is there something that you can learn from the way this new upstart competitor is doing things differently? But here we have the chairman of the ABC admitting he's never even listened to Joe Rogan. The bloke simply should be replaced. That is incompetence and recklessness, reckless indifference of the highest order. He should be there listening to what Joe Rogan is saying, not only what he's saying, but how he is saying it. What type of set is he using? How is he dressed? What guests does he have on? Joe Rogan has guests that would never see the light of day to appear on the ABC because the ABC holds a different ideological view and doesn't want these people heard. That's part of the reason why Joe Rogan is so successful. But to think this incompetent, pompous, arrogant fool is criticising Joe Rogan and as chairman of the ABC admits never even having listened to him, this should be the final straw that the ABC should be sold off. It should be defunded. And just take some of the other ABC's recent brilliant things that they've been up to. Remember what they did to Heston Russell, the Australian Afghan war commando. They fabricated video and audio and put to air to try and stitch up Heston Russell as a war criminal. You couldn't make this stuff up. They were caught red-handed and had to pay, got dragged through the courts, fought it all the way, even though they were caught red-handed doctoring the video to make Heston Russell look like a war criminal. And Heston Russell won $400,000 from the ABC. But what do the ABC care? That's the taxpayer just pays all that for their incompetence. They can go around defaming people all they like, knowing the taxpayer will pick up the tab. And then remember their story, their 3-part series on the Trump-Russia collusion hoax, where they ran what was just a conspiracy theory, false conspiracy theory that had been peddled by corrupt Democrats in the USA. And the ABC didn't only run this story, they ran it and they called it The Story of the Century, a 3-part documentary that was nothing other than fake news and misinformation. Here's a bit of a clip.
Tonight, we begin our special 3-part investigation into the story of the century, the election of US President Donald Trump and his ties to Russia. The Kremlin's puppet master now has America dancing to his discordant tune. He couldn't have planned it better.
So the ABC have put that to air. Misinformation, peddling a conspiracy theory that has been proven to be false, peddled by corrupt Democrats, and the ABC apologised for this? Of course they haven't, they've gone on. And then take the ABC's conduct during COVID. The misinformation and disinformation that came out was peddled from the ABC. Just look at this little video clip of what the ABC were putting to air, lying to the Australian public, telling them falsehoods about COVID.
We're here to share some vax facts.
We call it vaccination information. No. Vax facts it is.
These vaccines have been through the same rigorous test as all the other vaccines.
They prey on fear, they prey on anxiety.
Scientists and experts around the world have approved these vaccines and decided that they're safe for use.
We know what the side effects are already. There are no surprises round the corner. There are no surprises round the corner. There are no surprises round the corner.
Getting the vaccine is totally free.
The best vaccine for you is the one that is available to you.
So get your vaccination.
When you can.
Being vaccinated is an important step to things getting back to normal.
I've had my first dose.
I am absolutely thrilled to be vaxxed.
Can't wait for dose 2.
Get yours.
Mr. Rogan, prey on people's vulnerabilities. They prey on fear, they prey on anxiety, treating the public as plunder for purposes that are really quite malevolent.
And there you had the ABC's doctor, TV doctor, telling everyone about those COVID vaccines, that everything was known about them, when there were no carcinogenic tests done for those vaccines. We saw Professor Ian Brighthope the other day in Perth break down in tears about the COVID vaccines. And yet we had the ABC spreading total misinformation, saying everything was known about them, when the ABC knew or should have known that no carcinogenic tests had been undertaken and there was zero long-term safety data. The ABC misled the Australian public. And then, on a personal note, there are the attacks on myself. These were just malevolent attacks. Here's a little segment from the ABC 7:30 report where they attack me and accuse me of spreading misinformation. But if you listen, it's not about going over the facts. It's not about whether checking my claims are true or false or debating the evidence. It's all about their own interests, a malevolent attack upon the government. Their attacks upon me were an opportunity to attack the Liberal government because the ABC wants Labor back in power, because they know the ABC is more likely to throw more dollars at them. So instead of debating the facts, instead of looking at the evidence, instead of giving me the opportunity, to debate it backwards and forwards, it's just a smear campaign aimed at attacking the government for a malevolent purpose. That is the ABC.
With so much on the parliamentary agenda, it's surprising that the social media output of a maverick backbencher is sucking up so much oxygen.
Craig Kelly, the federal MP. I'm afraid he's gone a step too far today.
But the first sitting week of 2021 has increasingly been consumed by the utterings of the member for Hughes, Craig Kelly. The backbencher has a long history of being always available to spout views on a wide range of subjects. But it is his persistent interventions on COVID-19 that have finally brought the issue to a head.
The Prime Minister has been very supportive.
Kelly insists all he is doing is sharing alternative views. It is worth breaking down the material he is sharing and the specific claims he is amplifying in the midst of a global pandemic. He has claimed that getting children to wear masks is a form of child abuse, and he has consistently promoted two common drugs, ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, the latter being famously boosted by former US President Trump. Australian health authorities do not recommend hydroxychloroquine and are reviewing the effectiveness of ivermectin. Which brings us to the most politically fraught question, whether Kelly is undermining public confidence in the upcoming vaccine rollout.
People now are going to think that, ivermectin,
it was this appearance on a podcast hosted by anti-vaxxer and celebrity chef Pete Evans that drew a swift condemnation from the Royal Australian College of GPs, which said no one should be enabling Evans, least of all a member of the government.
When I see somebody, let's take Australia for an example, Scott Morrison, where they've done billion-dollar investments into vaccine manufacturing companies, is using the taxpayers' money to work with what I would call an illegal or criminal organisation.
Evans repeatedly raised doubts about the safety of COVID vaccines. He's also shared videos like this one, which pushes even more extreme and discredited anti-vaccine theories.
So if you get the vaccine, especially as a young person, you are more likely to die from side effects from the vaccine than you are to die from COVID.
Correct. It's called pathogenic priming.
His comments have been criticised by many in the medical community, including the Chief Medical Officer, Paul Kelly, no relation. Yet the issue this week has become not what Craig Kelly is saying, but why the Prime Minister and his ministers have not been prepared to publicly rein him in on vaccines, even at a time when the government is spending $24 million of taxpayers' money trying to build public confidence in them. You don't go to Craig Kelly?
He's not my doctor, and he's not yours.
By today, the issue had become one of the Prime Minister's authority. Yesterday, journalists were briefed that the PM was unhappy and had made his feelings known to Craig about Craig espousing medical advice. According to Kelly, though, the PM only asked him if he was an anti-vaxxer. After question time, Scott Morrison sought to put an end to the matter.
It is true that views expressed by the member for Hughes do not align with my views or the views of the advice that has been provided to me by the Chief Medical Officer. Earlier today, the member for Hughes and I discussed these matters, and I made it very clear that that was the view of me as Prime Minister and, of course, the views of the government. Vaccination is critical.
The question remains, though, why it took so long for the Prime Minister to act against one of his maverick MPs. It's certainly not due to a lack of political authority, and his tardiness has come even with the lessons to be observed from America about what happens when you let people peddle false information.
Well, it's time to defund them. So how should the defunding work? Well, my suggestion is that firstly, you simply cut off the guaranteed taxpayers' funding and ask every Australian that likes their ABC to pay a subscription. So if you are a friend of the ABC, maybe on your tax return, you can have a little box on your tax return and say, how many dollars would you like to donate to the ABC? Who knows? With all the lefties up in the teals that love their ABC, and I'm sure they'll be willing to pay for it. Maybe they'll get more than $1.1 billion. So what I would do, and I hope maybe the Libertarians might take this policy to the next election, is that you simply divide the ABC. You keep all the assets in government hands and you separate the operation of the business, which is the goodwill, and you give it to the employees. Let's create a great ABC Marxist workers collective. And what we would do is every single person that had been employed at the ABC for every year that they've been employed. Give them 1 share each. Have a number of shares that you issue and give it to all those ABC employees. Give them the goodwill of the ABC for free. Then they can run the business on a commercial basis, and the Commonwealth, the taxpayers that own the assets of the ABC, that's the buildings, the land, the equipment, they can lease those to this ABC operations company. And the ABC can put together all the leftist propaganda that they want to without any complaint from the public, because the public will be paying for it. And if it makes a profit, these shares that every employee gets, well, they can sell them. And then they can pay some capital gains tax on it. And in the meantime, the taxpayer gets a return from the asset base of the ABC, all those fixed assets. That seems to be only fair. If those that love their ABC, will let them pay for it. Those that think the ABC is rubbish and a nonsense and don't watch it, why should they have to pay extra and higher taxes to fund this rot and this misinformation and this pompous and this arrogant organisation? It should simply be the old rules. User pays. So it's time to defund the ABC. Let's hope one of the minor political parties will take that as a policy into the next election. Australian taxpayers shouldn't have to kick in $1.1 billion to listen to this misinformation and propaganda spewed out on a daily basis by the ABC.